So I have a 2001 Yamaha WR250f, and I was having a lot of trouble starting it, and it was only running when the choke was on. And finally it got to the point where it wouldn't start at all. And so you go through the obvious things. There's 4 things on these bikes you got to look for if it's not starting. Of course, you have to get fuel and air and spark. But the other one is the compression, and I think everybody who's even looked at these bikes know that the valves have to be adjusted. And so yeah, I checked the valves and they were completely tight. So yeah, definitely needed that. So I took it apart and ended up actually replacing the valves. And actually, while it was apart, I went ahead and replaced the piston and the timing chain because they're actually pretty simple. And it's one of those things, while you've got it apart, you kind of ask yourself, do I want to let it go or just do it? So I did it. And also, looking at, the bike was really dirty when I got it. And the carburetor was really dirty, and I decided to go ahead and clean the carburetor too. And so basically I had it all apart. And when I bought the rebuild kit for the carburetor and rebuilt it all, put the stock stuff back in it came with the kit, accelerator, pump stuff, all that, and put it back together and still wouldn't start. And I was like, what in the heck? And of course I checked the compression. After the rebuild, I don't know what you're supposed to get, but I got 105 psi and it was holding strong. And and it's going through all the, I set the timing, so I know that's good, as much as one can know. I mean, it turns freely and it seems to have the right compression. And but what I discovered is that it really wasn't. It was getting fuel to the carb, no problem, but there was no fuel going into the motor. Almost no. I mean, I had very, very little fuel. I would take the spark plug out and it was dry. And I was kickstarting this thing over and over and over again. And I actually, of course, the key rule is you're not supposed to touch the throttle when you're starting it. But in frustration, I'm like pumping it, going, dang it, get some fuel in there. And still it was dry. And so yeah, I knew something was goofy. So one of the first things I'd say is, if you can't start these things in like 5 kicks, there's something wrong. Stop. Don't bust your leg, and don't get frustrated and be like, because if it doesn't start in 5, there's something wrong. It's probably not going to start in 5. So give yourself a break, walk away from it, and think about it a little bit. So I took the carb apart again, cleaned it all out, and was like, because what I'm thinking is the pilot jet and the starter fuel. I don't know if that's a jet or the starter screw, but so I was playing around with all those and put it back together. Still wasn't getting clean. So what I discovered is that on these carburetors, it's the Keihin or whatever FCR MX, and this actually has 3 parts to it. You have the top part of it, and then you have the mid, and then you have the float. Okay, so they may not be exactly one, but you have the float bowl that connects to the. You have the float bowl that connects to the mid part of the body, and the mid part of the body connects to the main part. Well, the standard thing you get when you get the rebuild kit is just for the jets and the gaskets for the float, and the needle and that. But you don't get the parts for the mid body. And as a matter of fact, I have a climber manual. I don't have the full source manual, but it doesn't even talk about splitting the mid body. When it talks about checking and doing things on the rebuilding the carburetor, it talks about the main jets and all that. Never says anything about the mid body. But so I thought about it, I'm thinking about it, I'm going through it, and I'm like, well, the pilot jet, which is here, it's got to go through the mid body to get into the main part of the carburetor. So I was like, I'm taking that thing apart. I'm going to see what's going on in there. So inside the mid pipe, there's 2 screws here, and they're held in with some Loctite So it takes a bit of oomph to get them loose. And then you have the 4 screws on top. And then you kind of have to pry it apart. But this thing was like totally gummed up. I've started cleaning it. So the pilot and the starter fuel come through this little bitty hole here. And there's a block that goes up and for the slide. And I haven't cleaned this yet all the way too. But I'm going to set it right here. So maybe I can get it and you can look at it. But this, come on, sit up straight. So this little bitty hole right here is the hole that allows the fuel from the starter and the pilot to get actually into the throat of the, this circle is concentric to the slide here. So when the slide opens, you're exposed to that, that area there. So that was, what happened is this O-ring here, it was just totally varnished over and had completely deteriorated, and you can imagine it was very, very easy to block that little bitty hole. So that was completely blocked. Even after, and I don't even know if spraying, spraying carb cleaner through that, of course, that's probably going to work its way up. But a lot of these really aggressive carb cleaners will dissolve these, especially if they're old and nasty. I don't know if that carb cleaner can dissolve it, but it was just like totally dissolved and, destroyed. So this gasket actually sits right on top. There's a gasket here that goes between these surfaces, so this sits on like this, right there. So it sits like that, and so this little bitty hole here is where all the pilot and starter fuel has to flow through to get into the throttle, or get into the main throat of the carburetor. So I'm 90% sure that that's what my problem was. So if you're having, I've got a gasket kit on order. I'm gonna replace it. I mean, I've cleaned this thing like nobody's business. So anyway, I'm gonna put the gasket kit in place and see if that does it. So if you're having problems with fuel, getting to the carburetor, but not into the engine, that's one of the first things I'd look at. And man, is this, I don't know, it seems like the manuals should address that. So anyway, I'll update it with what I find out, see if it works.